So, let's have a quick discussion of how the Russians made their synthetic quartz crystals. This process has really been adopted by most of the world, so even though the process is probably about 50 years old, all quartz crystals today are made basically in this same way. We have a steel cylinder um, called an autoclave. It's also called a bomb because of its predilection to explode under certain circumstances. The autoclave is divided into two sections, the dissolving zone and the growth zone. In the dissolving zone, we have a material called lasca, and lasca is basically crushed quartz crystal, natural many times, or glass, high silica glass, or it can also be synthetic quartz crystal that, for whatever reason, didn't meet the um, growth criteria. So this is your area where the feedstock, if you will, is kept. Up in this area are where the seed crystals are mounted. The seed crystals are basically very thin plates of quartz, around 2 millimeters thick, upon which the quartz crystals actually grow. Now, it is the shape and orientation of these seed crystals relative to the quartz crystal growth axis that determines what kind of shaped crystal you're going to get, which is why we saw some of those strange shapes that we're going to talk about. But anyway, the whole process is separated by this plate called a baffle, and the baffle actually is what restricts the flow of liquid and also shapes the convective flow between the nutrient or dissolving zone and the growth zone. So what happens is this whole contraption is filled with a mixture of water and a mineralizing agent such as potassium chloride, and then it's filled up to about 85% of full, and that remaining area is what's used to actually build the pressure inside of the autoclave. So the whole thing is heated with an external heater, usually a resistance heater. What happens is the water quickly becomes very hot. The temperature is raised up to 400 degrees centigrade. And at this temperature and this pressure, and with the proper mineralizing agent, this lasca starts to dissolve and form a saturated solution. Now, up here in the growth zone, the temperature is kept about 50 degrees lower than it is in the dissolving zone. So what happens is when the liquid rises here due to convection, you'll see that the actual solution can no longer hold all of the silica that was dissolved in it, and it begins to deposit it on these quartz crystals. So very interesting in that regard. That's what really creates the whole process. It's a convective flow of warm, supersaturated liquid moving up into a cooler region, depositing it on the seed crystals, and then moving back down as it cools, and the process continues. So the whole process is contained inside of this pressure chamber, and the dissolution and growth may take 2, 3, 4 months, even a year. At the very top here, by the way, is the special sealing ring that prevents the whole thing from exploding. This is a Bridgman seal, was considered something of a revolution because it allows the seal to properly absorb the pressure without any one part of it becoming overstressed. So it's sealed. There's a thermocouple that actually reads the temperature inside the top of the chamber to determine that there is the proper temperature separation. And of course, there's a safety valve in case the pressure, for whatever reason, was to rise out of control. If this temperature down here, for some reason, became too hot, rather than blowing the whole assembly apart, the pressure relief valve will release the pressure. So, anyway, the big issue with this process is that the whole thing is sealed and you can't see what's going on. So you really don't know whether or not you've had a successful growth run until after you cool down the entire chamber and then pop the seal and remove the assembly of seed crystals. So that's how the process basically works. And it's what the Russians used. The sizes of these autoclaves have grown over the years. The largest one right now, I think, is a meter across and maybe 15 meters high. So a really huge assembly. Some of these can now grow up to 4,000 kilograms of crystals in one run. So impressive. And here are some pictures that were taken inside the growth facility. You can see the huge size of the autoclaves. Big tree of crystals, probably 1,000 kilograms, or another tree of crystals. I think those are ametrine. And a final look at some crystals. So, here we have an example of what the Russians were trying to synthesize. This is a standard quartz crystal. Actually, it's a doubly terminated quartz crystal, which in and of itself makes it virtually useless for electronics. It's a beautiful piece, unique and inexplicable. But this is not what the Russians were attempting when they started their projects. This crystal is an incredibly clear, pure, synthetic quartz crystal. What's very unusual about the Russian quartz crystals was the fact that they chose to grow them so that they resembled natural quartz crystals. That is to say, they allowed the development of all of the rhombohedral faces. And you can see here, this looks very much like a Herkimer diamond in terms of its completeness. Doubly terminated, and one of the things that's unusual about this one is that the seed crystal is virtually invisible, even though you can clearly see the platinum wire embedded that held the seed in suspension. You cannot see the actual seed crystal embedded. In fact, it was only with the use of a laser that I was able to get an outline of the seed. So, wonderful quality on this one. This crystal is really unique because what you're seeing here is blue quartz, which does not exist in nature. The Russians actually embedded cobalt in the crystal matrix by introducing it in the high pressure autoclave and produced this
absolutely gorgeous blue color. And you'll notice that near the top here, this is where the seed wire is embedded. And if you look, you can see that some stress cracks have developed. Now these have rehealed while they were in the solution, but one of the issues with blue quartz crystals is that by embedding cobalt in the matrix, you disturb the molecular structure of the crystal somewhat with those large molecules, and that can cause some cracking. I have some that don't display this at all. This is an early attempt. All of these crystals were made in the 1980s when the Russians were trying to create crystal materials for lasers for space-based weapons. This is another blue quartz crystal, and what's unusual about this one is the fact that it is rounded, which is really quite strange. The surfaces appear rounded. I don't know why the crystal grew in that particular habit. You can see the seed quite clearly, but this is a very unusual habit, and it's one of the reasons why I was so happy to add this one to my collection. By the way, all of these crystals from Russia were all provided to me by a gentleman named Dmitry Belikovsky. He worked at the Soviet Union Laboratory for Material Sciences, and he brought quite a few of these to the United States, and I was able to obtain a substantial part of his collection. Here we have an unusual trigonal shaped green crystal. This is actually the normal habit that quartz would form in if it wasn't so prone to twinning in nature. So even though quartz generally appears in six-sided crystals, it's generally two quartz crystals that are embedded in each other like Siamese twins. This one, not possessing that twinning, gives you a more true to life, or true to the molecular structure, non-twinned pyramid type shape, referred to as trigonal. Here is a light blue version of that very same trigonal shape. And these crystals are really just beautiful. I mean, I love collecting them because they do have these unusual shapes, these vivid colors. These small crystals were actually created as part of a large production run. This was the small crystals they created to test their formulations to see if in fact they would obtain the results that they were looking for. So, very unusual. Now here, I'm going to show you a crystal that is much more akin to what you see grown today. This crystal would be used to produce crystal frequency oscillator control units. It's about 8 inches long, about half an inch wide. It is absolutely pure. And these crystals would be sliced into very thin wafers and used in those electronic components. This is a very early attempt at creating those clear quartz crystals. This one is small, not really of commercial size, but this was what they were obtaining in the early days of quartz crystal synthetic research. Crystal like this in the produced in the 1970s was considered a huge success. Here we have another one of the really unusual Russian crystals. And again, what I'm always taken with by the Russian samples is the fact that they are so very clear and the faces are so shiny. As you'll see from some of the other crystals, this is not something you often see. A lot of the crystals that are produced here in the United States or in Japan, they have frosted surfaces because of the process that's used when the crystals are grown, and you just don't get that beautiful shape. And again, this is another control crystal, just a test used prior to producing their large full-scale run of crystals. Here's an interesting one. Everybody makes mistakes, and the world of crystal growing is no exception. This crystal was grown and for whatever reason was a freak, kind of strange looking. I often think of these as similar to those double struck stamps or coins that you see. It just didn't come out the way they planned, and because the autoclaves where these are grown are sealed and have no viewport, you really don't know you're going to get a screw up like this until after the chamber is opened, after several months of growing. Here's another large trigonal shaped green crystal. The green, by the way, is caused by an isotope of iron. Not an isotope, I'm sorry, but a valence of iron. I believe this one is Fe2, for those of you who are scientifically inclined out there. Again, you can see the seed crystal, but you'll see some of this cut in gems. It is making its way out there into the gemstone world, but these particular crystals, again, because they were grown during the old Soviet Union weapons era, are quite unique. Here's one of the lighter blue cobalt colored crystals, and again that very interesting trigonal shape. I can't stress enough how very difficult it is to find these crystals. If it wasn't for Dmitry Belikovsky, I don't think there'd be any of these in the United States. This one is a very deep green crystal. You can see it is an emerald green color and really, really beautiful. It's It's so dark a green, it's almost black. In fact, when you look at it from, you know, a non-backlit environment, it really looks black. Here's another unusual habit crystal with the light blue color. Again, from cobalt. Cobalt is the primary metallic oxide that creates the blue color. And it's interesting to note these crystals, because they have cobalt and because the cobalt molecules are large, they are very prone to fracturing if you're trying to cut them. I know from sad experience that it's very difficult to cut this blue quartz without having it crack if the temperature increases too much. Now here is an Fe3 citrine crystal. Again, iron based in terms of its coloring agent. It's really beautiful. This one is a spectacular cognac or whiskey brown orange color, and I've seen this cut in gemstones and it just looks spectacular. Again, kind of tricky to cut some of these synthetic crystals. I prefer them as crystals, which is why you don't see too many cut stones in my collection. I have another video out there that shows some of the blue quartz cut into Vogel crystal shapes, and that's another topic for another day. But really beautiful, and again, so hard to come by. This next one is probably the finest example of the blue quartz that I have in my collection. It's very well saturated. The crystal faces are extremely well formed. This crystal, I've seen these go on eBay for like $300, and that's assuming you can win the auction, but they're hard to find, and I love these. This one here is like my pride and joy. Here's a smaller tabular shaped blue crystal. Again, the morphology on these is really unusual. You just you never know what you're going to see with these because of the different orientation of the seed crystals that the Russians tried. They came up with a lot of these different shapes because it's the slice of the seed quartz that's used and the orientation of that seed that determines what kind of crystal you're going to get. So sometimes you'll get a thin crystal like this, sometimes you'll get a thick crystal like the one I showed you. This is another one of my pride and joys from the whiskey brown coloration. Just absolutely gorgeous, and I love these. I'm so happy to have these in my collection because they are just absolutely beautiful. And when you think of the science that was involved in creating these and how cutting edge it was back in the 1970s and 80s when these were being grown, this was considered cutting edge science, and just beautiful. This is a lighter colored piece of the blue quartz, and you'll notice I'm going to hold this next to the one that I showed you that was my favorite, and what you'll see is basically they are almost identical. the shapes are so close, because if the seed is cut the same way and the growing conditions are maintained the same way, then these control crystals will grow pretty much the same. But again, these little crystals are not part of the normal production run. These were byproducts, really an attempt to make sure that the formulation was correct before they created a full-scale run that might take months and months and a lot of material to grow. And here's another unusual blue quartz crystal. Again, I'm going to show you everything in my collection, so some of this may seem repetitive because some of them look, you know, similar to one another, but there are different ones to come, I promise. Here is one of the whiskey brown quartz crystals done in a trigonal shape, again due to the seed. And really beautiful. This is a bigger blue quartz crystal. This is the morphology of this is very similar to the large full production run crystals, and I'm going to show you one of them when we get further on into the video. But you know, again, this is a control crystal, so not up to full scale, but certainly a beautiful piece, and again, all part of that wonderful era of Soviet science. This brown colored crystal, again, just really unusual. The seed must have been cut in a strange way, because this kind of a crystal is just not found in nature. You know, natural quartz doesn't look anything like this, but these are natural faces. None of these crystals that I've shown you have been cut or polished in any way. This is how they came out of the autoclave. And so you can see, depending on how the seeds are cut and oriented, you can get some of these really strange shapes. And that's part of the fun of collecting these. Now here's a strange piece. This is actually dual color. You've got the green in the middle, and then it starts to turn to a kind of a brown color. And these crystals actually grew this way because the initial growth had some of the steel autoclave dissolve into the silica growth solution, and so it produced this green, but that settles out pretty quick, and then the iron oxide that was placed in the solution took over, and you get the brown color. I've been saving some of these incredible pieces. This is one of the clear crystals, and this is absolutely magnificent. It is so clear and so perfect. Optical clear quartz like this would be used in prisms for laser assembly, might be used in lenses for spy telescopes. but just an incredibly beautiful piece. And again, you can see the platinum wire embedded really clearly, that held the seed in suspension while it was inside the autoclave. Here's another one of that beautiful, clear, sparkling quartz. This rivals the best quartz crystals that you'll find in nature. The ones that are in Carrara, Italy, or Herkimer County, New York, are the only ones that come close to having the shine, and they do not have the purity. These are virtually flawless. And one more of this style of crystal. I bought as many of these as I can get my hands on because they are one of a kind and you're just never gonna find them again. The Soviet Union's lab where these were produced was taken over by the Soviet mob. They tried to take it over, and when they couldn't, they broke in, smashed the equipment, destroyed the crystals. So these ones that escaped are the only ones you're going to see. Here's an interesting crystal. What's cool about these is, again, this was part of the testing of crystals back when they were trying to determine if the steel in the autoclave would cause tinting. This was the first run out of an autoclave before the walls had been run in. What usually happens with a steel autoclave for quartz is that the first time you use it, a layer of insoluble crystal grows on the walls, and that prevents any more of the steel from dissolving. But the first time round, you get these green crystals tinted with iron caused by the dissolution of the walls of the autoclave. Here's a larger specimen of that same type of quartz. And I've seen these little guys floating around on eBay for a couple $100 each. They're pretty rare, pretty valuable. Now this next one's really strange. This is one of those that they were really trying something different with. It has a very, very large seed crystal, very wide. I do not know what they were trying to prove with this. The large seed certainly caused a lot of instability in the crystal. This one has quite a few cracks in one sector. It's not flawless by any stretch of the imagination, but what it is beautiful and very unusual. This is a very unique piece in my collection. And this is one of the really unique pieces that I love. This is another screw up. A crystal that grew in a very unfavorable environment. Something happened inside the autoclave while it was growing, and it produced this mutant crystal, I call it. It's got all of these strange hills and valleys, but but it is absolutely gorgeous. You know, 1 in 10,000 maybe you'd see that would have this kind of a flaw that would be this beautiful. I wouldn't even call it a flaw. The crystal itself is flawless, but it has these strange external morphological features. So now we start getting into some of the bigger crystals. Here is a full production run cobalt crystal. This is what you get when everything is working as it should be and the run is going the way they want it to. This crystal is very pure. In fact, you can see all the way through the seed crystal. It's a good 4 or 5 inches wide and 6.5, 7 inches long. About 1 inch thick. And here's another full production run crystal. This is a beauty. This is actually one of the first crystals I ever obtained, and really clear. You can still see the seed, of course, and you can see the metal clips on the outside that held the rather large seed in the hydrothermal assembly. But this one's really beautiful. I just like it, the way these pinacoid shapes form on the outside. Just really beautiful. This crystal is kind of interesting. It started out and probably was nearly perfect, but something happened that caused this ridge to form. And also you'll notice that the faces here have been etched by the growth solution. What happened is somehow this crystal started to dissolve in the chamber. So what likely happened is the nutrient ran out and the convective fluid started to dissolve away the quartz. Really pretty piece though. Another one of my beautiful crystals in my collection. And here's another one. This one again has the metal clips. This is a standard production run crystal, probably used for electronics. But it's amazing how clear and pure these crystals are. If it wasn't for the science that made it possible for clear quartz crystals to be grown like this, the American telecommunications industry would never have gotten off the ground, because quartz was seen as an absolutely vital component, and they worked long and hard, both the United States and the Soviet Union, to develop the means to grow these crystals. Here's another big production run crystal. This is the frosting I talked about. Doesn't come off. I don't know why. Etched on that side. Just something about the way it grows, but the interior is absolutely clear. You can see the seed, of course, but this is a very clear crystal. And then this next one, I've saved the best for near the last. This is my pride and joy. This crystal is a Trigonal clear crystal, very large, very beautiful, and very rare. I didn't get this one from Dimitri. Actually, I got this one from a private collector who had no idea what she had. I think I paid $28 for it, and it's worth probably 10 times more than that. But really beautiful, and absolutely unique. You don't see crystals like this in nature. Quartz just does not follow this morphology. And then here's a piece of amethyst, purple quartz. Any amethyst you see in jewelry today is probably synthetic. It's just so easy to make and so beautiful when cut that you don't see the natural stuff anymore. This is a virtually flawless crystal. It's going to produce flawless gemstones if it's cut, although I like it, again, in its natural crystal shape. You can see it, these are the edges where it grew. And amethyst is made purple, actually starts out brown when it comes out of the autoclave, and they subject it to gamma radiation, and that's what produces the purple color. And then last but not least, the king of all of my crystals. This is the largest crystal in my collection. It is a beautiful, perfect crystal. And last but not least, this is the king of my collection. It is a perfect, large crystal. Weighs, around 7 pounds, and it is absolutely beautiful. Crystal clear, perfectly terminated, and just gorgeous. This is the height of the crystal grower's art. These can be used in wave plates or windows in space probes, but this is a beautiful one. Absolutely unique in my collection, and the perfection. You'd never see a natural crystal with this degree of perfection. So there you have it. A large collection of Russian-grown crystals. I hope you enjoyed seeing them. Again, this is really a testimony to the science that the Soviet Union was able to bring into effect. Until the 1990s, the Soviets were probably the most advanced crystal growing organization or nation on the planet. Their crystals were considered some of the most advanced. A lot of the crystals that were done in some of these unique colors, being doped with different oxides, are considered still to be state-of-the-art today, although the Chinese have really started to grow their own as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, post them to my YouTube page, and I will try to answer you. Thank you. Have a good night. And here is the entire collection in my display cabinet. Figure you'd get a kick out of seeing them all together. That's it.